Okay. All right. So we now have a quorum. President of the Board of Selectmen. Selectman Schaefer can't make it. And Selectman Thompson is having technical difficulties as well. So we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We have 3 board members present, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you have a flag nearby, I pledge allegiance
the flag of America to the republic for which it stands, one under God, indivisible, liberty.
All right. First item is we are going to go into executive session for legal counsel. So I will make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056E for consultation with legal counsel.
I second.
And I motion Sam seconds. All those in favor, Sam? Okay, Shelley?
Aye.
And I vote as well. That's 3-0. So we're going to go into executive session. The town manager will be putting you all in a waiting room until we come out of executive session, when you can join us during our regular agenda. Thank you. All right, I'll declare us out of executive session. There is no action to be taken by the Board of Selectmen. Our town manager is allowing people back into the meeting space. Joe, when everyone is in, please let me know.
I will. You got 2 left.
Okay.
1 left. Looks like everybody is back.
All right, welcome everybody. Sorry for the extended executive session. We're going to move on with our regular meeting. Moving on to number 2, conflict of interest disclosure. Any board member that finds himself in conflict with an agenda item, please let the board know. Under adjustments to the agenda, we've got Alyssa Tibbetts, attorney Alyssa Tibbetts, present to discuss TIF draft number 7. Joe, were there any other adjustments to the agenda before I defer to attorney Tibbetts?
None, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. Attorney Tibbetts, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for taking the time to go over yet another draft of our TIF policy. I'm going to turn this over to you for the highlights.
Having me. It's nice to see you all again. Would it be helpful if I share a screen, or I don't know what would be easiest for you? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great if you could share.
I've got permission to do that. I will do so. So I have a draft here, which is the most recent version, and hopefully you all can see that now. This includes many of the prior revisions have already been accepted here, so they won't show up as some of the red lines that I think had gotten pretty busy over the course of several drafts. So most of this has been cleaned up and accepted in terms of revisions from prior versions that we'd worked on, with the exception of some new proposed revisions as we've looked at this again, just for the board to consider in working through some of what we have added to this over the course of the various iterations. So I will just briefly go through the sections that are already in the policy as kind of a refresher, but then I will take a little more time just to highlight what we're proposing to change in this particular draft. So the introduction to this policy is that it is intended to serve as a guideline for the town in both establishing new TIF districts and also in administering existing TIF districts, and what that would look like in terms of providing assistance to projects in particular, or establishing districts to the extent that you decide to establish new districts beyond the existing district that has already been established, the village tax increment financing district. So it talks a bit about just sort of the basis under Maine law for establishing TIF districts, what that means, and what you can do with it as a municipality in terms of capturing new assessed value and utilizing the tax revenue from that new assessed value for purposes that are set forth in what we call your development program for a TIF district, which are sort of at a high level, tend to be most commonly infrastructure within the district and other economic development programs within the municipality. So this purpose and introduction outlines sort of establishes what that looks like from the perspective of state law and also the development program that you've already adopted. And then identifies that the purpose of this policy is, as I said, intended to be a guideline or provide guidance for you at the local level to identify how you want to utilize the existing TIF districts or new TIF districts. One of the revisions you'll see here is there's a new provision that has been added that allows the select board to offer certain waivers of the policy under certain circumstances. And so in previous drafts, we had talked about providing some flexibility to vary or differ from the provisions of the policy to the extent it's otherwise consistent with state law in your development program. And we're just proposing to take that out because you now have we're proposing a more specific waiver provision later on in the policy, which we'll look at. So that's the first revision on page 1, is really just making this consistent with some of the other provisions. So the policy then goes on to talk about what we call eligibility for assistance. And I've just outlined here as sort of a reminder as we think about this, that when you have a TIF district or when you think about assisting a project, someone can either come to the municipality really for 3 things. 1, to ask you for a new TIF district and potentially a credit enhancement agreement, which is how a developer would really most commonly receive assistance from the town for a project. 2, to think about amending an existing TIF district to enable a credit enhancement and to enable a credit enhancement agreement. Or 3, just to provide a credit enhancement agreement in an existing TIF district with no need to amend the district. And those are really just 2 distinct terms that are important as you look at the policy. The district is what's known as the TIF district. The assistance that you're providing is typically in the form of a credit enhancement agreement, which is what we refer to as the CEA. So this section outlines the eligibility for that. And again, this is the town's policy. So really up to you as a board to determine the minimum requirements for somebody who might come forward and ask for assistance within a TIF district for development of a project. So this sets forth that criteria, which we've talked about in the past, and that largely hasn't changed. What's really changing here are more of the specifics about the process for asking for a developer or a property owner to ask for assistance. And we've tried to really clarify the distinction between the TIF district and the credit enhancement agreement in this section. And then
quick question.
Sure.
Sorry, you had notated on that section that it may be helpful to distinguish between a TIF and a CEA throughout this policy, as they are technically different. So
Yes.
How should we address this? I mean, is this where we address it, or?
Yes, so the recommended changes here generally do that. I just wanted to call out that the goal here is so that when you are talking about assistance with potential developers or property owners, that it may be that they're asking for, as I said earlier, a new TIF district for a property that doesn't exist in a TIF district. And if that's not the case, it's likely that they're asking for a credit enhancement agreement in an existing TIF district. So I think it's really just fundamentally being sure that when we talk about this outside of the policy, we're also clear on what those who might come forward asking for assistance are really asking for, or what they would ultimately need to do that. And then in this section, just as a matter of process, the existing language talks about a public hearing being held to receive comment to the extent that a CEA is being requested. And I just note that the development program, which is the document that governs the existing TIF district, also requires this, which is a good, sort of a good practice for us to include it in the development program. If the town were to consider any new TIF districts, that's language we could put in the development program there as well. But I just wanted to highlight that so that if for some reason down the road, the town considers additional TIF districts, you want to be sure that as you develop those documents, they're consistent with this policy, or to the extent that they're not, the policy may need to be looked at again at that time. And then application process, as I said earlier, this is really the one of the primary changes to this proposed policy. Just lost my, here we go, sorry, ability to scroll, lost the bar there. This is really providing more detail to the policy than we had before in terms of the actual application process, how that will be considered, who will review it. So at this point, it proposes that the town manager and the select board will receive and review applications, whether that's for a TIF district, an amendment to a district, or ultimately a credit enhancement agreement, and that you may then solicit input from other bodies, whether it's the RREOC or an economic development consultant, as you deem appropriate throughout that process. And then ultimately you would negotiate the terms of either the TIF assistance or the credit enhancement agreement on a case-by-case basis to determine whether the project meets the eligibility criteria as set forth in your policy, and whether, what information you might need at that point. And then based on your recommendation, you will put together a proposal for assistance that ultimately will require town meeting approval. And then there are some provisions here just about payment of fees, so that if a developer is coming and requesting assistance, the town would require that the developer or the property owner be responsible to reimburse the town for the fee, for the costs or its costs of having to prepare the materials and work through the negotiations. And the waiver provisions here, as I said earlier, are just more specific in terms of if for some reason, as you go through this process, you determine that a particular request doesn't specifically meet the criteria of this policy, typically because it's something you haven't necessarily thought about or thought to address in the policy, then this provides some guidance for waiving provisions and really ensures that you remain consistent with your comprehensive plan and your zoning ordinances and all of the other provisions that are typically governing any kind of development within the town. And these provisions are, I'm sorry, I'm skipping through them quickly, but these are existing provisions that we had talked about previously in terms of mandatory guidelines for anyone who's requesting assistance to ensure that they are demonstrating that they're either, extraordinary infrastructure costs or economic advantages, significant new tax value, really the reasons behind or the basis for a request for assistance that would ultimately benefit the town as well as the potential development program. And then similarly, guidelines that determine the level of municipal participation. So to the extent the town's considering assisting someone through this TIF district and a credit enhancement agreement, what are the long-term implications of the project, or benefits of the project? Will it contribute to the revitalization of the downtown district, improve a blighted area, create public infrastructure facilities? And many of these were ultimately or originally drafted to be consistent with state law. And many of these serve as the basis for establishing a TIF district to begin with. So these are really useful guidelines for determining participation in the form of a credit enhancement agreement. And then this provision, a lot of this just moved to section 2. This is really just replacing and consolidating the procedures and the application procedure that we're proposing. So a lot of this language is still incorporated. It's just been moved to be consolidated into the application procedure that we've already talked about. And then lastly, I think this is my last comment, transfer of ownership provision we've included here. And I just wanted to note that this is also something that is often included in a credit enhancement agreement itself. That's a very common provision that is really specifically between the town and the property owner in the agreement, in the contract that they're entering into, to ensure that the terms of the credit enhancement agreement, to the extent that the property gets transferred to a new owner, will continue to be upheld, and that the town has notice of that. And then this provision has been in the policy for the expenditure of TIF revenues. As I said earlier, the expenditure of TIF revenues has to be approved or be recommended by the select board and ultimately subject to appropriation at town meeting each year, and annual allocations of TIF revenues to any particular developer that might be negotiated would also be factored into that annual budget that is developed. And the town has the ability from year to year to look at the capture rate, which is the percentage of the tax revenue that the town is capturing and sheltering in the TIF district based on new value that is created in that year. So much of this also reiterates what is contained in the development program for the district, and any new districts that could be developed in the future would also set forth these terms. But this policy will help guide you as if you were to look at additional districts going forward. And then conflicts of interest is a common provision among many of these policies, and but particularly important for TIF districts, to the extent that any official or member, employee or otherwise, who are participating in a process to consider TIF assistance under this policy stands to gain or benefit from a particular credit enhancement agreement or any kind of public assistance through a TIF district, then obviously they would need to disclose that, and you need to ensure that people are aware of that as they go through the process so that there are no conflicts. Well, that's the high level overview. I'm happy to answer any questions about these proposals or the policy generally.
Do you think we missed anything?
No, I think we've really covered it all. I mean, and probably then some, to be honest. In many of the policies that I work on defer some of this to the development program, but I think that what we've included here is a great guide, especially to the extent that the town considers any other TIF districts in the future.
Madam Chair, there was a question in the chat. Is it okay if I read that for Alyssa? Okay, Alyssa. So Chris asks, does Rangeley have the ability to participate in a municipal bond issuance funded by the TIF, or is it restricted to a CEA? That's the first part of the question. And then the next part was a kind of an observation. I think our dollars are probably too small, but it could be helpful with affordable housing. And then the final part, put another way, does the TIF have to be dedicated to a CEA?
So I'll answer the last question because I think that kind of sums up the others as well. The TIF district does not have to be solely dedicated to a credit enhancement agreement. That's just one option. It could include a bond issue to the extent that you feel that you have the revenue to support the debt service on the bond issue. So that's certainly something you wouldn't necessarily commit to until you felt like the TIF district was performing and you have projects that are really generating new revenue. And that, just like a credit enhancement agreement, would obviously be subject to approval at town meeting for any long-term debt issuance, because although it could be paid through TIF revenue, it would still be a general obligation of the town. So it's still, debt of the town, just as any other bond would be. You just have a dedicated revenue source to pay that debt service. Alternatively, you can use TIF revenue to sort of pay as you go. So if you are really building up revenue in each year and you can identify projects that you can pay on a shorter term, that's an option as well. So credit enhancement agreements are just one of the options that are often used to encourage development and or sort of entice or incentivize development to come into the community. But TIF revenue can be used a lot of other ways.
Chris says thank you.
Oh, good, thanks.
Are there any other questions for Attorney Tibbetts? All right, I think we've finally reached the final edit.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate you zooming in.
Absolutely. Take care.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to number 4, review and approve meeting minutes. Our first is from January 7th. It says 17th.
17th, right?
Yeah. January 17th, 2023.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented for the January 17th, 2023 meeting minutes with any errors or corrections.
That's Shelley's motion.
One error being the 17th.
Shelley's motion,
Second.
Sam seconds. Any
Sorry.
further?
My battery's dying. I'm sorry. Major crisis.
Plug it in, plug it in.
I'm trying.
You're a quorum.
No, I know. The pressure's on. I'm trying.
All right. All those in favor, Shelley,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
and I am affirmative as well. Next up is the January 30th, 2023.
I make a
Budget-
motion to accept the, oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
I make a motion to accept the regular meeting for January 30th, 2023 as presented with any errors or corrections.
All right, that's Shelley's motion.
Second.
Sam seconds. Any discussion on that set of minutes? All right, Sam, your vote?
Yes, aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well. And that's a 3-0 vote. That's it for meeting minutes. Do we have any public present to speak on a non-agenda item? I'm not seeing any hands. Are you, Joe?
I am not, Madam Chair.
All right.
No hands.
Okay, no hands. Boards and committees, we have got meeting minutes from the Airport Commission, September 26, 2022 meeting, the Rangeley Region Economic Opportunity Committee from November 14th and January 23rd, and then the Planning Board from January 11th, 2023. We don't have anything under consent items. This is rare. We always have something under consent. All right, under correspondence, we do have some correspondence to summarize from the Rangeley Region Economic Opportunity Committee. They have issued an opinion that they voted 3 affirmative, 0 negative, 2 to abstain to send the following statement. That they do not support the ordinance as written at this time and recommend a committee to understand the underlying issues and determine a solution or plan that works for both short-term rental owners and neighbors. We have a letter from Aaron Bolster, who is the president of Allied Realty. And in a nutshell, his letter also raises concern regarding the short-term rental ordinance. And is generally not in favor of the ordinance in general and thinks it's the wrong approach. We then have a third letter or piece of correspondence from the Good Neighbor Vacation Rental Coalition. They are asking that they are proposing an alternative to the short-term rental ordinance that we are reviewing at this time, and would like us to consider creating a town-appointed advisory committee to the selectmen for the purpose of data collection surrounding the short-term rental discussion. So they want to make sure all viewpoints are represented. And this is the same group that proposed the short-term rental ordinance about 9 months ago, I think it's been. But basically, they feel that more data needs to be collected so our community has factual information before they can vote on the ordinance. And so those are the three pieces of correspondence regarding Chapter 34. And I'm just going to make a note that what we have said publicly during our workshops, I mean, this has been a process 9 months in the making, you know, and what the Board of Selectmen has said during our 4 workshops was that, you know, this will go to public hearing. It's the next step for people to share support, share concerns. These letters do not, it's great. The board welcomes on correspondence, of course, but these are not actionable items. This is correspondence, and folks have rendered their opinions. Once, once a public hearings are scheduled, folks will have plenty of notice, and it will be a time to share concerns or feedback regarding the ordinance as it's written, and then we'll take that public feedback at a scheduled time when everyone has an equal opportunity to voice and participate. So thank you to everyone who took the time for their correspondence. We have got a letter of thank you from Lifelight for the annual $2,000 donation. It's on our warrant every year. It's part of the list of donations. So they got their check and they're thanking us for that. The TIF policy, we're moving into old business. And TIF policy draft 7, this is what we just went over with Attorney Tibbetts, who has been absolutely fabulous to work with during this tax increment financing policy period. And so this is the first reading. I don't think there are, Shelley, do you recommend any changes or adjustments to the TIF policy as was presented, or Sam?
No.
I don't.
Okay. All right. So, Joe, we need a motion.
Should we though have a clean copy, because the ones that I have still has the notations on the sides?
Correct. That's what I think. That's what we all got were the notations. So, how do we wait for a clean copy at our next meeting, or is this still considered draft 7?
Madam Chair, that's draft 7, and I believe you can make a first reading on that tonight.
Okay, so a motion to accept the first reading of draft 7 of the TIF policy.
So moved.
Shelley's motion,
Second.
Sam seconds. I don't have any comments or questions. Seeing if the board does. All right, all those in favor, Sam, your vote?
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
And aye for me, so that is 3-0 to accept this first reading. All right, moving on to chapter 34, the current draft of our short-term rental ordinance. Also, what you found included in with your selectmen's packets was a short-term rental ordinance from the town of Gray. This was presented to me from an area homeowners association who is optimistic that, or hopeful that this will be presented at town vote. And we'll plan to participate during the process. But I guess the one thing that was mentioned to me was that they liked the purpose statement, and I think that is kind of where we're geared towards with our purpose statement, is that it's a quality of life issue, and to ensure that they the neighborhood in which they operate is, maintains the quiet enjoyment of all who live there. So that was what I noticed with the gray short-term rental ordinance is it's fairly to the point. And, the thing of it is, I don't know if, we're missing 2 other board members. I don't know if they have feedback on this short-term rental ordinance. So I don't know if if we should schedule another workshop, Joe, or if this should be bumped to the next meeting for the board to comment. We're not ready for a public hearing until the board votes to move the current draft forward.
The board, you do have some time, Madam Chair, to schedule a public hearing. I think March 21st is kind of the date that you don't want to go by for public hearings to get on the warrant. And that same thing applies for Chapter 38 when you talk about that. So your next meeting will be, I think it's the 21st of February. That leaves a little bit of room, but I would shoot for March 21st for your first public hearing for the warrant process.
All right, March 21st for our first public hearing.
And you could schedule that at your next meeting if you wanted to do that with a full board present.
Okay. I've got a question from Jeff. Have there been significant changes from what was submitted by the ordinance committee? If so, can you share the current version? So is the current version on the website?
I don't believe it is, but I will make that happen.
So let's just explain the current version. So what the board has been presented is the markup or suggestions from our town attorney. This is our first comment from the town attorney. And, I've got concerns with a couple of the suggestions because that we should probably discuss publicly. One of them is, the additional reference of a registration fee to be annually set. The option for a registration fee is already in the ordinance under Article 34.31. It's not the intent of the board. We're not. This draft doesn't indicate a registration fee because that's not what we wish to present. Is an ordinance with a registration fee. So I think the board needs to hash through what the attorney recommendations are in red. That's the version we've been given. And so so let me appeal to the board, to Shelley and to Sam, as far as what are your thoughts? Do you want to go over this now? The red line suggested corrections. Would you rather wait for a full board? Any preference?
I would
we
like
can go
to
over
wait
them
for
now.
You both spoke at the same time.
Sorry, Shelley,
Sorry.
go.
I was thinking to wait and do it with a full board.
I think we need to review it with the rest of the board anyway, and at a public meeting. But so the current version that will
One has to
provided.
abstain anyways.
Say that again, Sam.
One is abstaining, right? So we just need Ethan, really.
Yeah, it's I think, yeah. So Selectman Thompson said she would be abstaining from any vote. I believe she still participates in discussion, but there's she will not vote. And she is one of the signatories on, she is a participant in the Good Neighbor Coalition. So that's her conflict. and her employer is a owns the short-term rental agency. So yes, we can make this available to the public. However, just with just caution that the attorney comments have not been discussed publicly. So Shelley wishes to wait. Sam, you know, I think you were open to discussing things now, which, I mean, we certainly can.
Yeah, we can wait. I mean, that's fine. I mean, this is as hard as it is with Zooming anyways,
Yeah,
and not being in person, to be
Yeah.
honest.
yeah, we definitely prefer to be in person. Okay, all right, so we will move this to our, this current draft to our next selectmen's meeting. And the current draft will be on the town website. Just seeing if there are any chat questions. Okay, chapter 38, the zoning ordinance. So Joe, if you look in Joe's notes here, we've got a clean version present, and Kristen, who is our town attorney, is working on a summary of major changes, which is a monumental task. It sure is, Joe. So this is, Joe's recommending scheduling a March 21st joint public hearing with the planning board, correct, Joe?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
So,
And we're going over the warrant the same night? That's gonna be long.
well, we're going over chapter 34 the same night, which I don't recommend. Both of these ordinances,
Separate.
yeah, we should have them on separate evenings. They both may have, you know, we hope it will have great public participation in. So looking at the calendar, you know, we've just told folks that, you know, March 21st would be the public hearing for chapter 34. But we should probably move one up a little sooner, Joe.
Okay.
And I need to go grab a calendar, excuse me. All right. So the 21st is the day after a regular selectmen's meeting.
March 21st is a Tuesday.
It is a Tuesday. So we could have a public hearing on either chapter 34, chapter 38, the week of the 13th.
Madam Chair, I would recommend having chapter 38 be the later date, just because you have the planning board to work with, and also Kristen is going through that gargantuan summary.
Yeah.
So maybe you can do chapter 34 the week of the 13th. On the 14th, I'll just let the board know that the sewer commission will be meeting regarding the rate study that evening.
Okay. All right, so we're looking at either Monday or Wednesday. I do have a potential conflict Monday. I do have a regularly scheduled meeting with another nonprofit second Monday of the month, which could run long, I don't know. Wednesday, the 15th, how does that look for folks? For chapter 34 public hearing. Shelley, how does that look for you?
What
Right,
time are you gonna do it? You're gonna do it at 4:30? You're gonna do it at 5, 6?
Doesn't really matter to me. Does the board have a preference?
Madam Chair, the ordinance committee is scheduled to meet at 5,
Okay,
from 5 to 6.
all right, so we'll start at 6 o'clock. I will ask, I'll run it by Selectmen Schaefer and Thompson and see if they're good with chapter 34, 6 p.m. on the 15th. And then chapter 38 review on the 21st. We should schedule a time for that. Or we could do that. Yeah, we should schedule a time for that. Keep it consistent at 6.
Mhm.
Okay, 6 p.m. on the 21st for chapter 38. Okay.
Sam, do those dates work good for you?
Yes, they do. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so please, comments. We'll bump any further board comments on chapter 38 for our next meeting, when hopefully we've got a full board and we're meeting in person. Any other questions or comments on chapter 38? Val, did you have a question? Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, I mean, I know it's huge and massive, but if there's a current version to be available to look at it before that meeting, that would be really helpful.
Again, I think that's on the website. So it'd
I
be
can't find it where there's the old one that we're currently under, but I don't see anything about the new one to be seen.
It will be, Madam Chair. When we put chapter 34 on, the new 38 will also be posted.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Val. Good question. All right, any other questions on chapter 38 or chapter 34? The last bit of business, no, we have 2 more under old business. Wastewater system fiscal sustainability plan and rate study update. Go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of takeaways here. One of them is that a draft plan is getting close. That's going to be discussed with the Sewer Commission on the 14th of March. At this point, we're thinking about a possible rate adjustment a year from this July, so it wouldn't be effective. We wouldn't propose it to be effective this July, but next July. The other takeaway, which I brought up in one of your budget meetings last week, is that we're going to have some loans paid off this year. One of them in October, I believe, of this year. The other one I think is already paid off. So we're going to have roughly $124,000 or so that we will not have to pay towards debt service in the sewer budget. And we'll bring this up again during the budget process, but I just wanted to recommend that we put at least 100,000 of that into our reserves to pay for future projects. So again, that's primarily a budget discussion, but I wanted to explain why we are recommending that. The main reason is for our SCADA system that we've been talking about for a couple of years. So that's a data control system that's going to cost a couple $100,000. So this is really just an update on the plan, on the program. There'll be more detail unleashed to the sewer commission next month.
Thank you, Joe.
Mhm.
Any questions for Joe on the wastewater system fiscal sustainability? Okay. Moving on to the climate resiliency plan. Joe, you've made some notations here. Why don't you go ahead and verbalize those?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a few weeks ago, we met with Zach from AvCog. He's our point person for the community resilience program. It's a $50,000 non-matching grant opportunity for the town. We took some public comment in that meeting, and there was an opportunity for public comment after that meeting. We didn't receive anything via the website for public comment. Really what we were soliciting was feedback on what projects the public thinks that we should undertake that would help us be more climate resilient. I have, as I mentioned, I think in the last meeting or even in the workshop, I have a suggestion that we propose to update the furnace in the highway garage. There actually are two in there, but I'd like to consolidate it to one. That is really an inefficient system and it's become quite unreliable. So that would probably take up a big chunk of the $50,000 grant possibility, but I didn't know if there were any other suggestions, but that would be my suggestion as the main component of our application. I think we could apply for a couple of smaller items too. And just as a follow-up, when you decide tonight, if you would vote to decide tonight, I will work right away with Zach to get our quotes together and begin finishing the application. So there was a list of other items. Some of them are heat pumps and solar panels and so forth. So I'd like to be able to work with Zach as soon as we can. The deadline, I believe, is the end of or the middle of March. So there's a little bit of sensitivity in terms of timing. So I didn't know if the board had any other recommendations or thoughts about programs for the grant or projects for the grant.
Yeah, I think what's been raised previously, Joe, were, geared towards saving, whether it be solar to offset the electricity costs or heat pumps, again, any way to save our taxpayers money. So if we don't have to raise funds, to replace, two furnaces with one good efficient system, I think that's a bonus for taxpayers. I think, yeah, if there is any, if after you get a quote, if there's any money left over, I mean, we've talked about electric vehicle chargers in our, perhaps in our Depot Street parking lot as a possible revenue stream, and to kind of get Rangeley up there, or in sync with kind of the trend towards electric vehicles, or at least having that ability for folks to have a public access to those chargers. And again, it has a possibility of being an income producing project, but this seems to be a good place to start, Joe. And I guess if there's any money left over, we could look at some smaller projects. Have to be like within the next meeting, I think, because of the deadline, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So the board is okay with the lion's share of the project being the furnace at the highway garage, and if there's a difference between the grant amount and that quote, would you'd like me to come back to you at the next meeting to solidify the projects we'll fill in the gaps with?
Yeah, and Shelley, do you have anything, or Sam?
No, I agree with that. I think that's great. Thanks, Joe.
I agree with that too.
Okay, great. So you got a consensus, Joe?
Thank you.
Right, that's it under old business. Moving into new business. Joe is asking for the board to put on your thinking cap as far as who to dedicate the town report to. So please do that. And Joe, when do you need to know by?
We've got a month and a half, probably.
All right. Next up is the Main Service Centers Coalition. We need to appoint a couple of delegates, and it is our town manager's recommendation to appoint the town manager and assistant town manager as delegates to the Main Service Centers Coalition.
And Madam
Yes,
Chair, to sign the resolve, or allow me to sign the resolve in your packet, authorizing the town to join the Main Service Center Coalition for the upcoming year. We belong to it currently. And it is very useful. We get a lot of insight into when the legislature's in session, especially, we get a lot of up-to-date insight there that's been coming in. So the appoint Tracy and I, and also if you would consider allowing me to fill out the resolve to authorize membership in the Main Service Center Coalition.
all right, looking for a motion.
All right, I'm gonna try it. I make a motion to appoint the town manager and assistant town manager as delegates to renew the membership for the Main Service Centers Coalition, in addition to the town manager to sign them up.
Second.
All right, so that's Shelley's motion, Sam seconds. Are there any other questions or comments? Shelley, your vote?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative, aye. So that passes 3 unanimously, nothing. And then, excuse me, the last item under new business is the airport consultant. And Joe, you've got a summary in your meeting notes, and you're the airport manager. So why don't I turn this over to you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So recently I released 2 distinct RFQs. One is for planning services, one is for engineering services for the airport. That's kind of the way the FAA likes things to be done. We have a multi-year RFQ here for certain services. On the engineering side, I'll just briefly read the items to you. They begin in 22, which we were working on this one last year, and they end in 28. Plow blade, design, construct, airport reconstruction, apron reconstruction, easement acquisition, taxi lane design and construction in front of the corporate or conventional hangars, obstruction removal, that's the trees on the 32N, construct taxi lane for T hangars, design permit construction for taxi lane, and then pavement maintenance. So those are the items on the engineering side. On the planning side is related to, you find it here. Easements and obstruction removal for the trees that I mentioned on 32. So we typically would have a consultant engineer that would help us with these items. Right now, we don't have one that has been selected to do these particular items, which is why we had to put it out to RFQ. So the Airport Commission reviewed the RFQ materials. We had 3 responses. The Airport Commission individually reviewed each of those responses, scored them separately. They discussed whether they intended to interview or not. And because there was It was not a tight race. They decided to forego the interviews, and they have recommended to me that I recommend to you that we award these contracts to Stantec, who has been the town's engineer for a number of years. So I am recommending, based on input from the Airport Commission, that the board select Stantec for both airport engineering and airport planning services for the items listed in the RFQ.
So you need two separate motions. You need one for to select Stantec for engineering, and then a second motion to select Stantec for planning services.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, looking for a motion.
I motion to select Stantec for the engineering of the, so I need to specify or
No, you can just say for the airport.
for the airport, okay? And
Yep. So that's Sam's motion.
Second.
Shelley seconds. Any other questions or comments for Joe? All right, Shelley, your vote.
Aye.
Sam?
I,
And I vote in the affirmative as well. That passes 3-0. And so next up is for Stantec for planning services.
I motion to select Stantec for the airport's planning services.
That's Sam's motion.
Second.
And Shelley seconds. Are there any questions or comments for the planning portion? All right, Sam, your vote.
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
And I for me. That is 3 in the affirmative. Right, that takes care of the items under new business. Moving on to the town manager report. We don't have any department head updates yet for this month. Under calendar, our February 20th meeting is on President's Day, so there's a recommendation that we reschedule to Tuesday, the 21st, which is the board okay with that? We have a consensus? Okay,
Yep.
so that will we'll have a regular Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 20th. Anything else we need to address under calendar? We've already scheduled the 2 public hearings. I think that was the only thing lingering that I can see in my notes. Under other business, during our last budget discussion, the board asked for a summary of what the boards and commissions stipends were, with the goal of some consistency. So just bring this summary to our next, budget meeting, okay? And we can discuss it. We can discuss it then, because it looks like there are some committees that are compensated financially for their meetings and others that are not. So we'll work on some consistency there.
And our next budget meeting is tomorrow night at 4:30,
Correct.
and then again on Thursday at 4:30.
Yes.
Okay.
Moving on to staffing, and Joe, I will segue this to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've put 3 separate positions on the agenda under staffing. The first 2 are closely related. And during the budget unveil last week, I had alluded to the fact that I've given a lot of thought to the vacancy in the Public Services Director position. I really like having that position, and I don't think we should abolish it completely, but I am recommending to you that for the upcoming fiscal year, we leave it open And instead of focusing on that, rekindle the Parks and Rec Director position, which I have included in the budget that I proposed to the board. Most of what I see in the vacancy that is cumbersome is really related, in the vacancy in Public Service Director is really related to Parks and Recreation type items. I'd like to bolster the programming. We're doing really well with the program. I want to keep it that way. But the areas that I'm observing the problems or lack of staffing really are in buildings, grounds, those type of things. So I think it makes sense to fill that position and revisit the Public Services Director opening at a later date. So per the staffing policy, I'm looking for your approval to do that. I would like to advertise right away for Parks and Rec Director. And it's so close in scope that I would advise paying that from the Public Services Director line, which currently exists. There's a fair amount of money in there that would more than pay for it. So obviously it's got to go through the budget process for upcoming years, but for now, I would like approval to put that concept into motion.
I motion to approve the town manager and advertising for the Parks and Rec Director.
Motion. I'll second it for the sake of discussion. So we don't have a job description, do we, Joe?
There is one. It would need to be updated and brushed off, and it's something I've been discussing with Annalee. She's got one that she was working on also. We put our notes together and make it uniform, so that it's got all the requirements, labor requirements and so forth.
So will that be ready for a budget meeting this week?
Possibly.
Before I vote on anything, I would feel more comfortable knowing exactly what they're going to do, what their role is. And I would expect where it's looking at hiring a completely new position, I think we need a full board. I just need to get more of a grasp on it for the need of the position. But I was hoping, I was going to discuss that in our next budget meeting because I'm sure that we were going to end up doing Parks and Recs tomorrow.
Yeah, we can. I would feel better with a full board as well, where this is a, this is a new position, kind of restructures the, what we currently have. So we do have a motion on the floor, and so I will take a vote. Shelley, your vote.
No.
Sam.
We're just motioning to table this, so, right, or bring it up again.
It will be revisited because it's a part of the budget. So this is basically what the motion is for Joe to post for this position.
Yeah.
I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we gotta get more information, so no.
Okay, and I'll vote no as well. So this motion fails with 3 negative votes. So we'll be discussing that this week, and I'll remind the board of the meeting tomorrow. Joe, do you know if it's going to be in person, or if is the conference room cleaned up, or are we going to be Zooming again?
So the conference room will not be ready for meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't believe.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
kind of wanted to wait and make that call in the morning. We've got fans on in there now. I do have a company on, expected to either come tomorrow or Wednesday. So I
Okay.
really, at this point, would say probably not, but
Okay.
I'd like to revisit it in the morning when I have better information.
All right, that's, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. All right, so we are, I mean, we're in the throes of budget. We'll be discussing this anyway, and we do have we have 2 budget meetings scheduled this week. We'll see if, tomorrow's needs to be rescheduled or something, but we'll know more tomorrow morning. We have got the, next up, Joe, Office Assistant Customer Service Rep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a vacancy forthcoming in this position. The person that is in it will be leaving at the end of this week. I would like to fill this right away. I'm not proposing any changes or anything significant in this. I probably will review the job description with Annalee prior to hiring anyone, just to make sure that everything's in line there, but this is essentially the same or exactly the same as it is today. I'd like to get that filled as soon as we can. So again, in keeping with the staffing policy, required to bring it to you for approval prior to taking any action on filling it.
I motion for the town manager
Um,
to.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was good motion, sorry.
You go for it, Shelley.
I'd like to make, okay. I'd like a motion to table the office assistant customer service rep until we have a full board.
Shelley's motion to table until we have a full board. I'll second. I'll second for the sake of discussion. So Shelley, is this in keeping with what you said previously, just wanting a full board to?
Yeah, I want to have a full board, and some of the questions that we had when this position was created was like right after COVID, and where a lot of people were doing things online. And I was just wondering if the impact has been the same, or if it's more, or if it's less. We really haven't heard anything about if more people are coming in or less people are coming in.
Okay, so a review of then a need for the position.
Right.
All right. So tabling this until we have a full board. We have a motion in a second. Sam, do you have any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Sam, your vote.
Aye.
Shelley?
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well. So we will have further discussion of this when we have a full board. Monthly financials are on the website. And that is it under town manager report. Shelley, do you have something?
Yeah, I just had a question about the monthly financials that were provided. Is there anything that we need to notate from this report with any increases or decreases in any particular lines? And the other thing in regards to financial report, we haven't heard anything yet on interest rate options for investing some of that money that we have with the deposit rates increasing.
That's correct, Madam Chair. That's a project we're still working on. I'm thinking either at the end of this month or at the beginning of March, you'll have that presentation. The audit is also almost ready for you.
Okay, super.
And Madam Chair, to the first point, I can mark up the financials and bring that to your budget meeting and answer that question tomorrow. I don't have that in front of me tonight.
That would be great, Joe. All right, anything else under town manager report? All right, moving on to select board communication. Shelley, do you have anything to share with the select board?
No.
Sam, anything?
I'd like to give a shout out and thank Chief Bacon for the fire department coming to Moose Alley's rescue on Sunday. Our sprinkler pipes burst over the bowling lanes, very tragic.
Oh,
But they were amazing, the crew, everybody. So just wanted to thank them.
great to hear. But
Mm.
no, not the water issue, but great.
Yeah, that's an ongoing thing. That's gonna be a while to fix.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have anything for select board communication, so next on the agenda is we need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Have to cite the full thing.
Now,
I know, sorry, Sam.
all right. I motion to go into executive session MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, 405. Is that it?
60.
60, there it is.
Yeah.
Union negotiations.
Sam's motion, all
Second.
right. And Shelley seconds. All those in favor, Sam,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
and I vote in favor as well. So executive session it is. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to go into executive session and thank you for joining us for the public portion of the meeting.
Thank you.
All right, I'll declare us out of executive session. There's no action to take. Now need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Out of,
Sam's mo-
let's say, you have to say the whole thing again.
No, just,
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Right.
Thank you.
Second.
Shelley, did you second?
Mm-hmm.
Shelley second. All those in favor, Sam,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
and I. So we are adjourned.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Tomorrow.